They say every family has a golden child and a forgotten one, and sometimes the forgotten one learns to stay quiet long enough for the world to forget she ever had a voice. That night, as the chandelier above flickered its dim yellow light across the dining table, she already knew something was coming. It always came: the comparisons, the casual remarks, the way her parents' eyes softened when they looked at her sister and hardened when they turned to her. The table was set just like every Sunday: crystal glasses, silver cutlery, and that polished wooden surface her mother loved to brag about. Her father sat at the head of the table, posture straight, eyes locked on his phone as he scrolled through emails, barely acknowledging her presence. Her sister sat across from her, smiling like a magazine cover, flawless, graceful, glowing. She was everything their parents ever wanted. And then there was her, the disappointment, who never seemed to measure up, no matter how hard she tried. Her mother poured wine into her father's glass, then into her sister's. When she reached her, she hesitated. The bottle hovered midair. "You don't really drink, do you?" she said with a little laugh that wasn't quite a joke. She smiled politely, shaking her head. But inside, she felt that familiar twist of shame, the kind that doesn't fade, no matter how many years pass. This wasn't new. It was routine. Like a well-rehearsed play, each member had their role: the proud father, the glowing sister, the perfect mother, and she, the silent spectator of her own humiliation. Her mother passed the bowl of salad to her sister first, even though she was closer. "Take as much as you want, darling," she said, warmly, then looked at her. "And you, dear, maybe skip the dressing tonight, hmm? You've been sitting a lot lately." Her fork froze midair. Her sister glanced up briefly, then down again, pretending not to hear. Her father didn't react. It was easier to stay out of it. Inside her chest, something tightened, but she said nothing. Because that's what she'd been taught: keep quiet, smile, don't make it worse. Then came the moment she'd remember for the rest of her life. Her mother leaned back, sighed dramatically, and turned to her father. "You know, I was talking to your aunt today," she began. She was asking about the girls. "Of course, I told her how well Sarah is doing her promotion, her engagement, her volunteer work at the hospital. She's just so complete." Her father nodded proudly, eyes still glued to his phone. "That's our girl," he said with a small smirk. Then her mother looked at her eyes sharp, voice lowering as if delivering a truth long overdue. "And then there's you. Still figuring things out, I guess?" She felt every eye at that table on her. Even Sarah looked up now, her perfect smile faltering just slightly, her hand tightening around her wine glass. "I'm working," she said quietly. "You know that. The company." Her mother cut her off, laughing softly, like her words were too fragile to be taken seriously. "Working? Yes. But doing what, exactly? You've been there for years and still have no promotion. You live alone, you never bring anyone home, and—" she paused, her voice dropping, "you barely call. You're so distant lately. It's like you enjoy disappointing us." The room went quiet. Even the air felt heavy, as if it too was ashamed for her. Her fork slipped from her hand, clattering against the plate. She looked at her sister, the one who always seemed to have everything. Sarah met her gaze, her eyes soft with pity. That pity cut deeper than any insult. Pity was worse than hate. Hate meant they saw you. Pity meant they never did. Her father finally looked up. His eyes, stern and cold, landed on her like judgment carved in stone. "Your mother's right. You could try to be more like your sister. She's focused, responsible. You, on the other hand," he sighed, shaking his head, as if he couldn't find the right words for his disappointment. "You're just not half the woman she is." The words fell heavily across the table. Silence followed, the kind that echoes long after it's spoken. Her mother didn't flinch. Her sister looked down. Her father turned back to his phone, conversation over. Just like that, she was dismissed as if her worth had been measured, found lacking, and neatly folded away like an old napkin. But inside her, something snapped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, the kind of break that happens deep inside the soul where no one can hear it. She stared at the tablecloth, at the flickering candlelight reflecting off her glass, at her mother's manicured hands resting elegantly beside the wine. Her father cleared his throat. "Eat. Don't make it awkward." She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Narrator. In that moment, she realized they'd never really seen her. Not once. Not in her childhood, when she brought home drawing, did they ever hang. Not in high school, when she came in second place instead of first. Not in college, when she chose a major they didn't approve of. Every moment of her life had been a quiet audition for love she was never going to get. And that night, she was done auditioning. She placed her napkin slowly beside her plate. The sound of fabric brushing the wood felt deafening in the silence. Her chair creaked as she pushed it back. Her mother looked up, startled. "Where are you going? We're not done." She didn't answer. Her father frowned. "Sit down. Don't make a scene." Her eyes lifted to meet his, steady and calm, calmer than she'd ever felt before. "I'm not making a scene," she said softly. Her voice didn't shake. Her hands didn't tremble. "I'm just realizing something," her mother scoffed. "And what's that supposed to mean?" She looked around the table at the people who had shaped her pain, who had built her insecurities brick by brick, year after year, and she smiled. Not out of anger, but clarity. "That you've spent so long trying to compare me to her," she said, nodding toward her sister. "That you never noticed I stopped trying to be her years ago." Her sister's eyes widened slightly. Her father leaned forward. Her mother's lips parted to speak, but no words came out. She continued, voice calm but sharp. "I used to think I was broken because I didn't fit your version of perfect. But maybe I was just meant to build something different." She stepped back from the table. Her mother's voice rose, desperate now. "Don't you dare walk away from this table, young lady!" But she was already turning. The room seemed to blur the glittering dishes, the candlelight, the polished perfection that had suffocated her for years. Each step away from that table felt like shedding a skin that never belonged to her. And as she walked out of that dining room, she wasn't running from them anymore. She was walking toward something, though she didn't yet know what. Behind her, her mother's voice trembled with outrage. Her father muttered something about respect. Her sister called her name once, softly, but she didn't turn back. Because this time, the silence she carried wasn't weakness. It was power, quiet, deliberate power. The kind that comes when you finally stop asking people to love you and start deciding to love yourself. That night, she left the house for what would be the last time in years, but none of them knew it yet. None of them knew that the daughter they broke at that dinner table was about to become the woman they'd one day beg to understand. That night, she didn't go back to her apartment right away. She just drove. The city lights passed her by in a blur of gold and gray. It was one of those nights when the silence inside the car is louder than the noise outside. The words from dinner replayed again and again in her mind. "You're not half the woman your sister is." Each repetition felt like a nail being hammered deeper into her chest. But somewhere beneath the pain, a new voice whispered, maybe it's time they stop defining who you are. She drove until the streets grew empty, until her tears dried and her hands stopped shaking on the steering wheel. When she finally parked by the river, the air was cold, and the city skyline shimmered across the water like a promise she didn't yet understand. She sat there for hours, staring at her reflection in the dark glass of the window-tired eyes, hollow face, but something fierce burning quietly behind it. She realized she had been living for their approval, chasing a version of herself that never existed. That night, she decided to vanish not out of spite, but survival. The next morning, she packed a suitcase, just enough clothes, her laptop, a few books, and an old photo of herself as a child the last time she remembered being truly happy. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She turned off her phone, deleted her social media accounts, and walked away from everything. No calls, no explanations, no goodbye. She disappeared like a ghost, leaving behind her own unfinished story. At first, it was terrifying. The silence that used to feel like punishment now surrounded her. There were mornings when she woke up wondering if she had made a mistake. She moved into a tiny apartment in a quiet part of the city, cracked walls, flickering lights. No luxury, no comfort. But it was hers. For the first time, the air didn't feel heavy. The walls didn't echo with judgment. The only voice that spoke in that room was her own. She found a job small, unimpressive, but honest. She worked in a local cafe, washing dishes and wiping tables, earning barely enough to survive. Every night after her shift, she sat by the window and wrote scribbles of anger, hope, confusion, fragments of dreams she had buried long ago. The same hands that once trembled under her parents' disapproval began to find steadiness in creation. She didn't know what she was building, but she knew it was hers. Months passed. Then a year. She changed cities again. She started taking night classes, business, marketing, and public speaking. At first, she was invisible in class, quiet, reserved, always sitting at the back. But one day, during a group presentation, the professor asked her to take the lead. Her voice shook when she began speaking, but by the end, the whole room was silent, listening. For the first time in her life, her words carried weight. Something inside her shifted that night. She realized she didn't need to shout to be heard. She just needed to believe she deserved to speak. She began working harder than she ever had before. The girl her parents once dismissed as aimless was now building something quietly powerful, piece by piece, day by day. She joined a small startup as an assistant, stayed late every night, and learned everything she could about leadership and management. Within months, she was handling clients, closing deals, rewriting systems. Her boss noticed. Then the company noticed. And for the first time, people began to see her not as someone's sister, not as someone's daughter, but as herself. Still, there were nights she'd sit awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the echo of her father's words. Not half the woman your sister is. But instead of breaking her now, those words fueled her. They became the quiet thunder in her veins, pushing her forward every time she wanted to quit. Pain, when transformed, becomes the purest kind of strength, and she was proof of that. Years passed. Her career grew. The girl who once couldn't look her parents in the eye now spoke at conferences, led teams, signed contracts, and helped others find their confidence. She moved into a new apartment, modern, high up, overlooking the city she once thought would swallow her whole. Every corner of that place told a story: the worn desk where she'd studied late nights, the mirror where she'd practiced her first confident smile, the walls that no longer echoed with doubt. But success didn't erase the memories. Sometimes she'd pass a restaurant where families laughed together, and something inside her would ache not out of longing, but recognition. She knew what it felt like to crave that love, and she knew what it cost her. She received an email one morning. An old friend from school had found her through a work article. The message was simple: your sister got divorced. Your parents aren't taking it well. She stared at the screen for a long time. Her sister, the golden one, the perfect one. For a moment, she almost felt sorry. But then she realized her sister's perfection had been a cage too. They were both raised on impossible expectations. The difference was, She broke free. She didn't reply to the email. She wasn't ready. Not yet. The months rolled on. Her company promoted her again, this time to director. She managed hundreds now. The same woman who once sat in silence at her family's dinner table was now commanding rooms full of people who looked to her for guidance. She traveled. She met people who saw her brilliance before her scars. And little by little, she began to forgive herself for staying silent all those years. But she never forgot that dinner table. The sound of her father's voice still lived somewhere deep inside her, buried but not gone. She used to wonder if one day she'd go back not for revenge, but closure. Yet every time she thought about it, she realized something deeper. The real revenge wasn't confrontation. It was a ransformation. It had been 7 years since that night. 7 years since she pushed her chair back, since she walked out of that house and left everything behind. 7 years since she heard her mother's voice, or saw her father's face, or felt the weight of that dining room's silence. But the message on her phone, "Please come home for dinner," brought it all rushing back like a ghost she had spent years trying to bury. She didn't reply for 2 days. She read the message, deleted it, and restored IT. There was a war inside her one part that still ached to be seen, and another that had finally learned she didn't need their validation. But curiosity, or maybe unfinished pain, has a way of pulling people back to where it all began. And so, on the 3rd day, she texted back one word. Okay. The day of the dinner arrived like a storm she couldn't avoid. The drive to her parents' house felt unreal. Familiar streets that once carried childhood laughter now felt foreign. The house stood just as she remembered, though smaller somehow. The garden still, trimmed perfectly, the porch light glowing warm, the same smell of jasmine in the air. But something in the air had changed, or maybe it was her. She parked the car in silence. For a moment, she didn't move. Her reflection in the rearview mirror stared back, confident, composed, successful, yet her heart beat, like she was still that broken girl from years ago. She took a deep breath and stepped out. Her heels clicked against the driveway, each sound echoing like a drumbeat of memory. The door opened before she even knocked. Her mother stood there, older, thinner, her hair streaked with gray. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of things left unsaid. Her mother's voice was softer than she remembered. "You look different," she smiled faintly. "I should hope so. It's been a long time." Her mother nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "Your father's in the dining room. He's been waiting." That word again, dining room. It sent a chill down her spine. She walked through the hallway, her heels tapping against the same tiles that once echoed her escape. The walls were lined with photos her sister's wedding, her parents' anniversaries, smiling faces she was no longer part of. But then, tucked between 2 frames, she noticed a photo of her younger self. The same picture she had once carried her childhood smile, bright and fearless. She paused for a second, her throat tightening. When she entered the dining room, everything looked almost identical. The same table, the same chandelier, the same faint hum of the clock on the wall. Her father sat at the head of the table, newspaper folded neatly beside his plate. He looked older, smaller even, his once commanding posture now slightly hunched. He looked up when she entered. He didn't smile, but his eyes for the first time showed something like uncertainty. Her sister was there too, seated beside him. Her once flawless expression was different now. Tired, weary, as if the years had taken more from her than anyone realized. "Hi," her sister said quietly. "Hi," she replied. They sat. For a moment, no one spoke. The sound of the clock filled the silence again, just like before. Her mother poured wine. This time, she didn't hesitate when offering it to her. "You drink now?" she asked softly. She took the glass and smiled faintly. Sometimes they began to eat. Small talk at first, her job, her travels, her life in the city. Her parents listened quietly, nodding at all the right places. It felt almost normal. But underneath the politeness, tension hummed like a low note waiting to break. Finally, her father set down his fork. His voice came low, steady, careful. "You've done well for yourself." She looked at him, trying to read his face. "Thank you. I've seen your name in some articles," he continued. "The company you work for, it's impressive." Her mother added, "We're proud of you." The words should have felt warm, but instead, they landed like something foreign, something she didn't quite trust. Years of silence couldn't be mended by a few polite compliments. She nodded, her smile tight. "It took a long time to get here." Her sister spoke up next, her voice quieter than she remembered. "I always knew you'd do something big." She turned to her sister, studying her face. There were lines around her eyes now, not from age, but exhaustion. "I heard about the divorce," she said gently. Her sister's smile faltered. "Yeah, it's been a rough few years." Her mother interjected quickly. "She's doing fine now, moving forward." But her sister didn't look fine. She looked like someone holding herself together by habit. For a moment, she realized that this wasn't just about her pain. Her sister had carried her own invisible wounds too, the weight of being perfect, of never being allowed to fail. Maybe they were both victims of the same expectations, just in different ways. She set down her fork, her gaze steady on her parents. "Do you remember that night? The last time we had dinner together?" The air froze. Her father shifted uncomfortably. Her mother looked down. Her sister's eyes widened slightly. "I remember," her father said finally. "I said things I shouldn't have." She tilted her head. "You said I wasn't half the woman my sister was." Her father's voice cracked just slightly. "I was wrong," her mother spoke softly. "We were all wrong." She leaned back in her chair, letting the silence stretch. It wasn't revenge, she felt, not satisfaction or triumph, but a strange, bittersweet calm. Her father sighed, the sound heavy, almost weary. "You have to understand, we thought we were pushing you to be better. We didn't realize we were breaking you." Her eyes softened, but her tone stayed firm. "You didn't break me. You just made me stop looking for approval that was never coming." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't mean to lose you." She looked at her, really looked, and for the first time, she saw fear, regret, and love tangled together. "You didn't lose me," she said. "You just never took the time to know who I was." Her sister wiped a tear from her cheek. "You were always the brave one. You just didn't know it then." For a while, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint clink of silver against glass, the breathing of four people realizing how much time they'd wasted building walls instead of bridges. It wasn't the apology that changed everything. It was the silence that followed, the kind that wasn't filled with tension anymore, but understanding. The same dining table that once felt like a battlefield now felt different, smaller somehow. Her mother reached out, hesitant, her fingers trembling as they brushed against her hand. "We missed so many years." She didn't pull away. She didn't speak either. She just let the silence hold them fragile, real. Her father's eyes, once cold and critical, now carried something new, something like pride, but laced with guilt. He cleared his throat. "I'm sorry." 2 words. Small, late, but they mattered. She took a slow breath, her eyes glancing around the table, the candles, the plates, the faces she had once loved and feared in equal measure. It all looked the same, but everything had changed. Her sister whispered, "You've become everything they said you couldn't." She looked at her, her voice calm and certain. No, I became everything I said I could. The words hung in the air, not as defiance, but truth. Her father leaned back, exhaling deeply, his shoulders sagging as if years of unspoken regret were finally leaving his body. Her mother dabbed her eyes, whispering, "We just wanted the best for you." She met her, others' gaze. "You wanted your version of the best. I had to find mine." The room fell quiet again, but this time, it wasn't cold. It was the quiet that comes after a storm, the kind that leaves behind ruins and relief all at once. There, in that same room where she once felt invisible, she finally existed. Not as a disappointment, not as a comparison, but as herself whole, unshaken, undeniable. The dinner continued in fragments of awkward laughter, shared memories, and old wounds slowly closing without needing to be reopened. Her sister talked about her plans to start over. Her parents listened. And for the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider looking in. She felt like someone who had outgrown the need to belong. The night stretched on. The candles burned low. The air softened. Her father raised his glass, hesitant, unsure. "To family," he said. She met his eyes. And for the first time, she didn't look away. She lifted her glass slowly, her reflection flickering in the wine, her voice calm and strong. "To learning what family really means. Sometimes, revenge doesn't arrive with fire or fury. Sometimes, it walks in wearing grace and sits down at the same table where it was once told it would never belong." The clock ticked softly on the wall. The night outside deepened, and the woman who had once walked away in silence sat there now, unshaken, the storm inside her finally still. Every time she walked into a meeting, every time she signed her name on a contract, every time someone said, "You're incredible at what you do," a part of her younger self smiled. The girl who once pushed her chair back and walked away was still there, watching quietly, as the woman she became rose higher than anyone ever expected. One night, while sitting on her balcony under the city lights, she took out that old childhood photo she had kept all these years. The little girl in the picture smiled widely, innocently, unbroken. She held it against her chest and whispered, "We made it." And in that whisper was every scar, every tear, every silent victory she had carried through the years. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. It was her mother. Just a few words. "It's been a long time. We miss you. Please come home for dinner." Her hand trembled slightly as she read it. Dinner. The same word that once tasted like humiliation now felt different, heavier. She didn't reply right away. She closed her eyes, the city hummed beneath her, the memories swirling like ghosts in the distance. It had been years since she walked out of that house, but the echo of that moment still lingered. The chair pushing back, her father's words, her mother's stare, her sister's pity, all of it had shaped her. She wasn't that girl anymore, but the question remained, what happens when the woman you've become meets the ghosts of who you used to be? She didn't have the answer yet, but something told her it was time to find out. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the balcony door. Strong, calm, unrecognizable from the girl who once sat in silence. She reached for her phone again, reading her mother's message one more time. The city lights shimmered behind her like quiet witnesses to everything she had endured. The wind whispered against her face, carrying with it a strange mix of dread and peace. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, she smiled not because she was ready, but because she finally knew she could face whatever came next. She wasn't running anymore. She had built her world, her power, her peace. But sometimes, the universe brings you back to the place where your story began, not to break you again, but to show you how far you've come. It had been a month since that dinner, the dinner that should have been closure, but instead became something else. Something quieter, more complicated. She had walked away that night not with vengeance, but with a strange, heavy calm. Yet deep down, she knew the story wasn't over. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't a single act. It's a transformation that keeps unfolding, revealing itself in every space where pain once lived. The days that followed were filled with moments she hadn't expected. Her mother began calling her. Her father sent messages that started with awkward greetings and ended with too many full stops. Her sister invited her to lunch one weekend, saying she wanted to talk. Each call, each message, came wrapped in guilt disguised as affection. And for the first time, she didn't feel small receiving them. She felt in control. Her sister met her at a small cafe in the city. It was raining outside, the glass fogging between them and the street. Her sister looked nervous, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "I've been thinking about us," she said softly. "About how things turned out," she nodded, watching her closely. "I've been thinking about that too," her sister sighed. "You were always stronger than me. You know that? Everyone thought I had it all, but I was drowning in their expectations." She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't seem to be drowning when you were the one they praised every day." "I didn't have a choice," her sister replied quietly. "You don't say no to them. You just become who they want you to be, until you forget who you are." Her words hung there between them, heavy with the truth neither had said before. For the first time, she saw her sister not as the golden child, but as another victim of the same story, someone who'd been worshipped, but never really loved for herself. The rain outside grew louder, the sound steady and soft. Her sister leaned forward, her voice trembling slightly. "I envied you. The night you left, I thought you were weak. But I was wrong. You were the only one brave enough to walk away." She stared at her for a long moment, her heart tight with old emotions. "Walking away doesn't feel brave when you're doing it," she said quietly. "It feels like drowning, but it's the only way you learn to breathe again." Her sister smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "You made it look easy." She shook her head. "It was never easy. It was necessary." That conversation stayed with her for days. It wasn't forgiveness she felt, not yet, but it was understanding. And understanding, she realized, is its own kind of power. Weeks passed. Her parents invited her to a charity event, one her father was organizing for his business foundation. He wanted her to attend, said he'd like her to say a few words about success and perseverance. The irony almost made her laugh, but she went. The event was grand chandeliers glittering, cameras flashing, people dressed in quiet wealth. Her father stood on stage, smiling the same polished smile he'd worn all her life. He introduced her with pride, calling her our daughter, the successful one, and for a brief second, she wondered if he realized how absurd that sounded after all the years he'd spent telling her the opposite. When it was her turn to speak, she walked up to the podium slowly, her heels echoing across the marble floor. She looked out at the audience, the same kind of people who'd once judged her parents' worth by their daughter's achievements. Her mother sat near the front, eyes glistening, her sister beside her, still and silent. Her father watched her from the side of the stage, expectant, proud, unaware. She took a breath, her voice calm, steady, resonant. "When I was younger," she began, "I was told that I wasn't enough, that I'd never be as successful, as graceful, as worthy as someone else. I believed it for a long time. I let those words define me, shrink me, silence me." She paused, letting the room grow quiet. But sometimes, silence can be the most powerful teacher. It teaches you what kind of voice you really have, and what kind of people deserve to hear it. Her eyes flicked toward her parents briefly, not with bitterness, but with quiet clarity. "I used to think success was something you needed others to see. Now I know it's something you build when no one is watching. It's not about applause or approval. It's about becoming the person you promised yourself you would be when no one else believed in you. The crowd was silent, completely still. Her voice didn't waver. I was told I wasn't half the woman someone else was, she continued. But what they didn't know was that comparison doesn't break you, it sharpens you. It teaches you to stop waiting for validation and start becoming your own measure of worth. There were murmurs of approval, quiet claps that grew louder. Her sister's eyes filled with tears. Her mother pressed a hand to her chest. Her father looked frozen, caught somewhere, between pride and shame. That was her revenge, not the words themselves, but the truth inside them. Her power wasn't in hurting them back. It was in standing there, unshaken, while they realized she had become everything they said she couldn't be without needing them to make it happen. After the speech, people swarmed her handshakes. Congratulations. Admiration. Her father approached slowly, eyes glossy, his voice unsteady. "You were incredible," he said. "Truly. I didn't know you could speak like that," she smiled faintly. "You never asked." He nodded, his gaze dropping, guilt shadowing his expression. "I'm sorry," he murmured. She looked at him for a long moment. "I know." Her mother hugged her tightly, the kind of hug that feels like an apology and a plea all at once. "You've made us so proud," she whispered. She didn't reply. She just let her mother hold her, realizing that sometimes forgiveness isn't spoken, it's understood. Later that night, after the event ended and the lights dimmed, she stepped outside into the cool air. The city glowed around her alive, awake, unjudging. She stood beneath the soft hum of streetlights, her heart calm in a way it hadn't been for years. Her sister joined her, arms folded, a small smile playing at her lips. "You changed everything tonight," she said. She looked at her, smiling faintly. "No, I just told the truth out loud for once." Her sister nodded, gazing at the city skyline. They needed to hear it. So did I. The two stood there in silence, side by side, not rivals anymore, not symbols of comparison, but two women who had survived the same expectations in different ways. That night, something shifted forever. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was permanent. For the first time, the weight of her family's words no longer lived inside her. They stayed behind in that house, in that dining room, in the echoes of a past that no longer defined her. Her life became quieter after that, but in a way that felt full. The company grew under her leadership. She began mentoring young women, those who came from homes where love had conditions and approval had a price. She told them what she wished someone had told her. You don't need to be half of anyone else. You are already whole. Her story spread beyond her circle articles, interviews, podcasts. People called it inspiring. She never called it that. She just called it survival. Years later, her father grew ill. The house grew quieter again. Her mother, older and gentler. She visited sometimes, sitting with them in that same dining room, the ghosts of the past now nothing more than faded memories. They spoke of simple things, the garden, the weather, the past in fragments. The bitterness had gone, replaced by a fragile kind of peace. One afternoon, her father looked at her and said, "You remind me of your mother when she was young, strong, stubborn, unstoppable." She smiled softly. "I remind you of me." He chuckled weakly, shaking his head. "Yes, maybe that's true." Revenge doesn't always come wrapped in anger or vengeance. Sometimes it arrives in moments like these, quiet, unassuming, but powerful. The kind of revenge that makes the world turn slowly in your favor without you having to demand it. The kind that doesn't burn bridges, but lets them crumble on their own while you keep walking forward. There were no more dinners of comparison, no more words that cut. Her mother started talking about the past more softly. Her sister called often, and her father listened more than he spoke. The house no longer felt like a cage, it was just a place with history. A place where a girl once pushed back her chair and decided to rewrite her entire life. Her revenge was never about making them hurt. It was about making herself whole. And maybe that's the most powerful revenge of all. Not proving them wrong, but proving to yourself that you never needed their permission to rise. She stood by the window that evening, the light spilling across her face, the sound of the wind whispering outside. Somewhere, far behind her, the echo of that dinner table still lingered, not as pain anymore, but as proof of how far she'd come.